Thank you very much, everybody, for coming this morning. So our presentation today is going to be about single sign-on and two-factor authentication. So first of all, I'll introduce myself. My name is Tim Alsop, and I'm the Managing and Technical Director of a company called CyberSafe. With me today, I've got my colleague Srinivas Cheraku, who's
Hello, everyone.
Srinivas is going to be helping with the installation of the product once we get to that point in the presentation. So here's the agenda. I've told you, I'm going to first of all tell you a little bit about our company. I'll keep that to a minimum because I know that we've got a technical audience here. We don't want to bore you with marketing stuff, so I'll just say a few words about the company, and then we're going to go straight into talking about our product, and I'm going to explain about how our product works, what it can do for you. And then we're going to actually do a live installation of the product, which will be quite interesting. Srinivas is going to do the install, and I'm going to explain the installation as we go. And after we've installed the product, we're then going to give you some demonstrations at the end, and there will be time for questions and answers. So let's continue. So first of all, about the company. We're a SAP Partner Edge partner. We've been a partner for many years, 27 plus years. Originally, the company was founded, but we've been a partner for about 16 or 17 years. So what do we do as a company? Well, we focus on selling solutions to SAP customers all over the world. And the area that we focus on is authentication, which can mean single sign-on, it can mean multi-level authentication or multi-factor authentication or two-factor authentication. So this is all we do as a business. It's not just a product line within our company. Every single person in the company is totally focused on this particular market that we're selling to. So we enjoy working with SAP customers and helping them with their authentication needs. The company is focused on quality. We have a lot of very, very happy customers. Sometimes when we engage with a new company, they like to talk to existing customers, and it's important to look after our customers. And also, I think it's important to highlight that we try to keep things simple when you engage with us. We don't have complicated pricing. We try and make it so that as many things as possible are free. So if you wanted to do a proof of concept, for example, that wouldn't cost anything. So enough about the company, let's go on to the product. So the product is called TrustBroker. TrustBroker is a policy-based multi-level authentication and single sign-on product. The product is designed to be very flexible so that it can meet many customers' needs. For many years, we've been adapting the product and enhancing the product, and we try and focus on making the product as flexible as possible because not every company has got the same requirements. Some people want to buy our product for single sign-on, some people want to use it for strong authentication, some people want both, and the product is able to address all of these needs. And even today, we come across, when we come to an event like this SAP TechEd event, we sometimes meet people at our booth who have new requirements, and that allows us to progress our product and innovate and add new features to the product so that every customer can benefit. So what does the product do? If you look at the bottom of this slide, it says secure single sign-on. I think hopefully you know what single sign-on is. Identity persistence is a capability where we've got multi-tiered applications. So for example, the application could be running with a client piece. It could be having a middle tier server that the user logs onto, like a .NET server or Business Objects Enterprise, BobJ. And when the user authenticates, they're authenticating to the middle tier, but then the middle tier needs to communicate securely with the back-end system using the user's identity. And that's called identity persistence because you're passing the identity down the chain of tiers within the application architecture. We also support electronic signatures. Some companies use electronic signatures for areas like PI sheets or quality management. Also, some of the banking communications modules actually support electronic signatures, so we can address authentication requirements in that functionality within NetWeaver. We also support internal users mostly, but sometimes, as you know, within companies, people who are internal within the company also need to access the SAP systems externally. So mobile users is also very important. And when we actually install the product, we're actually going to be demonstrating some of the functionality that we have using the Fiori client running on a mobile phone. So you'll see how it works from a mobile device as well as from a desktop. Now, the line that's highlighted in blue where it says strong authentication, that's actually highlighted because it's actually a really very topical subject at the moment. A lot of people are very, very concerned about data breaches and protecting their assets and compliance. And this is why we have this strong authentication feature in the product. So you'll be learning a lot about that as we go through the presentation. Especially for GDPR. GDPR is obviously new this year in 2018, but it's the requirements to protect data have been there for a long time. I think what's happened with GDPR is that the significant fines that are there have actually woken people up to realize how important it is to put security measures in place. I think with GDPR you can be fined up to 4% of your global annual turnover. So that's making people stand up and do something about it. So this is actually some statistics from a Verizon Data Breach Investigation Report, DBIR for short. This is the 2017 report, and if you look on the right-hand side, it says 81% of hacking-related breaches were caused by lost, stolen, or weak passwords. Now, in 2016, that was 63%, so you'll see between 2016 and 2017, it went up significantly. And I have it on good authority that in 2018 report, the equivalent statistic is more like 90 to 95%. So as you can see, the problem's getting worse. Passwords are obviously used by many of your users. Many of you in the room are probably, or hopefully, using passwords somewhere within your SAP system. And those passwords are being hacked. This is also very important to realize that some of those incidents where the data breaches occur are actually being caused by internal people. So people inside the company, they might be contractors, temporary staff, employees, are actually the people who are actually causing these breaches. So it's not just an issue of people coming in from the outside, as some people think. It's actually happening with people inside. And almost every week you read something in the news about a data breach that's happened. There's many, many examples of big companies that have actually had a data breach. So this is real. Okay, so often we find that when companies are actually looking at their security and their authentication, they start to think about implementing single sign-on, because obviously when you have single sign-on, you have less passwords, and if you have less passwords to remember as an end user, then you can have a stronger password, and that's one of the benefits of having single sign-on. But it's not the only benefit, and as you can see, I've got some here which I'll talk a little bit about. Because you can have a more complex password, theoretically that means it's harder for somebody to guess. But guessing a password isn't the only way of finding somebody's password out. With our products, when you implement single sign-on, you don't need to use SAP passwords anymore, apart from special user IDs like SAP Star or DDIC. These are the typical or administrator passwords. Usually you put those types of user IDs through a different control mechanism. So effectively there's less password reset issues when you implement single sign-on, and it potentially reduces theft. So the question is, does this avoid a data breach? Well, in a way, it kind of doesn't, because if somebody's still got a password to enter and that password is compromised, you can actually do more damage now you've got single sign-on, because somebody can steal my password and they can log in as me, and they can access all the systems that I can access through my single sign-on. Now clearly that's worse than without single sign-on. I think that is actually a bit of a paradox that's actually caused people to stop and think, do I actually want to implement single sign-on, because it might make security a little bit worse. So here's the paradox. So for example, if I have a single password and I log on to my workstation using that password, when I walk away from my desk, somebody else can come and sit at my desk and actually log into my applications as me. So, and this thing happens a lot. We go into companies sometimes, and I've kind of trained myself to look around the desks and look around people's offices, and you quite often see computers left logged on. It's the same at this trade show. You walk around the booths and you see people who've left their computers logged on. It happens. It's human nature. So it causes a problem. So what's the solution? Well, the solution is to use strong authentication, or two-factor stroke multi-factor authentication. Two-factor authentication is where you've got two factors. It could be a password and maybe access to a physical piece of hardware like a mobile phone or a token. And if you use something like that, if somebody steals your password, it's not going to get them very far, because they need the second factor. Multi-factor is like two-factor, except that there's more than two. So it reduces the risk of a data breach, and this is the kind of technology that a lot of companies are putting in place to stop them from having a data breach. It's something that you should do proactively, but we do know companies, I can't mention names, but there are companies that we've sold our products to who bought our product after they had a data breach. That's not the right way to do it. Do it before, please. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, the two-factor authentication has benefits not just for data breach avoidance, but also for compliance, because a lot of the compliance initiatives like GDPR, Sarbanes-Oxley, HIPAA, etc., they all actually suggest strongly that you think about using strong authentication. They don't mandate it, but it's strongly recommended. So that's all good. Let's implement 2FA, but how do you do it? Well, there are ways of doing it, multi-factor authentication. You can put it at the network perimeter, you can put boxes in that are sometimes called jump boxes, where somebody logs into the jump box and does the MFA authentication, and then they can log into SAP. We've seen many examples of this. But realistically, what you actually really want is a way of doing multi-factor authentication only when it's needed. So if somebody, for example, is logging into one of your SAP systems and entering timesheet data, should they be using 2FA for that? Is it necessary? Those are the kind of questions you should be asking yourself. So, and also, do you want it to happen for every user, and do you want it to happen for every one of your SAP systems? You may not, for example, need it or want it for your non-production systems, but you might want it for your production systems. So this is where our TrustBroker product comes in. TrustBroker is the product, as I mentioned earlier. TrustBroker implements a multi-level authentication architecture. So I'm going to explain what we mean by MLA, or multi-level authentication. So effectively, level 1 authentication is, the way we describe level 1 is that the user has actually logged on to the SAP system using some method. It could be single sign-on, it could be entering a username and password like a SAP password or an AD password. The end result is that the application server knows who they are. So this is probably what most of you in the room are using today, or those of you watching the video, because we're recording this, will potentially be doing the same. So you're logging into your SAP system. When you're authenticated, you're in. What we have done with our product is made it so that we deal with the level 1 authentication to give you single sign-on if you want it for level 1, but we also handle a next level of authentication, which is completely optional. You don't have to implement it, and you'll see when we do the install, we'll explain how that works, and you'll see it demonstrated. But when we do level 2 authentication, that's actually happening after we know who the user is. So let's say the user has authenticated, and we know that that user is called Tim Allsop. Our product can then run through a policy check to decide whether Tim Allsop needs to perform any additional authentication before he can be let in. So if you like, it's giving that extra check during the login to the SAP system. In this diagram, we're showing a SAP GUI logon, and in the particular example on here, we are showing that the CRM system is authenticating the user by asking him to enter his AD credentials. So it could just be AD credentials. It isn't really multi-factor authentication, but it's an additional authentication step which may be good enough for you. And a scenario that would help with is, for example, I log onto my workstation at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I don't log into SAP until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So when I log in at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, it might be useful to ask me for my AD credentials again, just to make sure that I'm still the same person that logged in the morning. So these are the kind of things that we can do. We can ask the user for their AD password, and some of our customers actually are quite happy with that. Alternatively, you can actually use multi-factor authentication. In this slide, I'm showing using RSA Secure ID. We support a lot more than RSA Secure ID, and I'll be talking more about that a little bit later. But if you were using an RSA Secure ID token, then it would be something you perhaps have on your key ring. It could be on your phone as an app. There's lots of different ways that RSA support authentication. So that would be the same user logging into the finance system. So each system will have its own policy that determines how users get authenticated. So here's another example, same type of capability, but this is for web-based authentication. So this is for what are called ICF services running on the NetWeaver ABAP stack. By the way, I don't show this in the slides or in the demo, but we also support the Java stack. So this secondary level 2 authentication can be implemented on the ABAP stack or the Java stack. And when we do it on the ABAP stack, it can be for thick client logon through SAP GUI, or for products like Analysis for Office or Windshuttle. Lots of different products out there that can be thick client have a thick client, but also for HTTP authentication. So that would work with CRM web client, it would work with Fiori Launchpad, it would work with NetWeaver Business Client, many examples of applications that are using HTTP to authenticate. So we've talked about level 1 and level 2. Level 3 is the next level. So level 3 is really the best way to describe that is it happens after the user's logged in. So the nice thing about this is that this particular functionality in our product doesn't actually care how the user logged in. Doesn't need to. So you could have logged in with a SAP password using off-the-shelf SAP user ID password login to your SAP system. We don't care. You could be using another product that you've bought for single sign-on, not our product. Obviously, we prefer you to buy our product, but if you have bought another product or you're using some other method of authenticating, we don't care. You can just use this level 3 functionality, and this is doing the authentication after you've logged in. So in an example here, a very hypothetical example, let's say you've logged in and you want to change an employee's pay rate in the HR system. So when that happens, you could actually be using a multi-factor authentication product. The slide here is showing a product called Duo. Duo is one of the products we're going to be using in the demo. Duo is a multi-factor authentication product. They used to be a startup company a few years ago, and they've built their product up to be a very capable product. And now, just last month, they got acquired by Cisco. So the product is now a Cisco product. But anyway, with the Duo product, it has a mobile app that it uses predominantly for the second factor. And in this particular case, the user would basically change the pay rate, and then they would get a message on their phone, and they have to press approve. So that's giving them the second factor. If somebody else did that, then they would have to have knowledge of their credentials, their user ID password, and also have physical access to their phone in order to be able to take on what the user is supposed to be doing. So it's more secure. Another example of cash disbursement. This is actually something that we're finding a lot of interest in at the moment because people are recognizing that when users log into their SAP systems and they're actually transmitting money, maybe through some banking network, like SWIFT, for example, then it's important to make sure that it's actually the person who you think it is that's actually authorizing that payment. And again, as I said earlier, if people log onto their computer or they've got single sign-on and they walk away from their desk, then how do you really know that it's the same person that authenticated? Could have been several hours ago. So cash disbursement, being able to use multi-factor authentication is a really hot topic at the moment and a very good business requirement that we can address with our products. So that's the end of my little presentation. Now we get to the exciting part. I'm going to hand over to Srinivas, who's going to actually do the installation, and then he's going to do the demo. And just for fun, I'm going to time his install so we can see how long it took. We did this in TechEd in Las Vegas a few weeks ago, and we want to see if we can beat the record. So thank you. Over to you, Srini.
Thank you, Tim.
Let me start the timer. Right, you can start now. Okay, so the SAP system that Srinivas is installing on is on a Linux box, so he's going to log into the Linux box. And by the way, we support all the operating systems supported by SAP, so the Linux OS, the Windows OS, as well as Unix platforms like AIX, HPUX, Solaris. So it doesn't really matter to us what the OS is. So the first thing he's doing is installing the TrustBroker product at the operating system level. So that's now installed. Now, it's worth pointing out that the steps that he's following here that are from his notes on the left-hand side are actually not the same order that we would normally get you to do them in. We've made it more efficient so that we can get to the end result quicker. And he's doing things quite quickly. Normally, what would happen is you would follow the installation instructions in our documentation. They're laid out step by step. You would follow them as our documentation suggests, and I suspect it would take a little bit longer than this. Typically, though, when a customer evaluates our product, we give them the software, and they have it up and running in the same day. It doesn't take very long, as long as they've got the right people involved. What Srinivas is doing now is he's preparing some add-ons. So there's part of our product functionality has some code running in the ABAP stack, and he's actually getting that ready so that he can log on to Saint and do the install. The SAP system is called A09. Obviously, he doesn't have any single sign-on at the moment, so he's going to log in using a regular SAP user ID and password into client 0, and then run Saint. Some of you in the room who are basis admins will probably be familiar with this. So the reason why we're doing this at the beginning is because it takes a bit of time. So he's going to start the installation going, and then we're going to go and do some other stuff to prepare the rest of the product. There are quite a few steps involved in this installation, and it's worth pointing out that some of those steps may not be applicable to your requirements. If you just want single sign-on, then there's quite a lot of these things that are not needed. Some of the steps that we're going through are actually just required because of the multi-factor authentication. But we wanted to show you how quickly it can be done, taking into account all of the functionality on the ABAP stack. So what he's doing now is installing, or he's done it, he's installed the license key. Our product has a license key so that we can use it for evaluation purposes. When the customer wants to evaluate the product, it stops working. And what he's just done then, it happened too quickly, but what he's doing now is he's creating Kerberos key table entries. We have a tool with our product called KTUtil, and when you're using KTUtil, you can create a Kerberos key table, and as you can see, it's very simple to use. You don't need to actually ask the Active Directory admin to help you out if it's set up properly. You can if you want, but we find that a lot of our customers prefer the ability to create key tables themselves, so the basis admin or the person doing the install of our product can actually create the key tables, and in order to get the Kerberos authentication, and they can use their own credentials. They don't have to share a password or ask for a special password to be set up. It's using their own personal credentials on the domain. And that means you've got auditability. You know who actually created the key table because you know who authenticated when the key table was created. It's one of the things that's quite often overlooked when people look at our product, but it's a very powerful feature because once the AD person has actually set it up, they don't need to do anything. They can go away and do their job and not be bothered again. He's doing this too quickly. You have to slow down, Srini. No, not serious. So what he's done also is he's copied some policies which we've predefined for multi-factor authentication using Duo. And as you know, when you're modifying the SAP instance profile, usually you would go into your SAP system and use the RZ10 transaction, or RZ10 if you're listening from America. When you run RZ10, you can modify instance profile parameters, and you have to do one at a time. It's obviously quicker for a demo if we just do copy and paste into the profile. So that's what we've done to modify the profile parameters. Okay, so now he's done everything he needs to do on the server side. We're going to wait for the add-on to install, and once the add-on's installed later, when that's finished, it will be...
I'm trying to install the software on workstation.
When the add-on is installed later, he's then going to restart the system, but while we're waiting for that, we're going to install the client software. Now, this client software is only required if you're using client software like SAP GUI, so that's why we're installing it. If you're using HTTP authentication, which we'll also be doing, there's no client software required at all, no browser plugins, no client software at all. So like the server software, the client software also requires a license key, and that's just for us to allow customers to do evaluations and have a timed install, so they try the product out, and then after a certain number of days they have to come to us and ask for an extension or buy the product. Okay, looks like the add-on has now completed. So before he restarts the system, he's going to create some RFC destinations. So basically the way that our server software is working is that it's got code that's installed at the OS level, which is where all the clever stuff happens. All the crypto code is at the OS level. And there's, for some of the functionality, and this isn't always required, for some of the functionality, specifically the HTTP authentication, there is some ABAP code involved. And that ABAP code needs to talk to the OS code. So it uses RFC destinations, which are, there's a registered RFC server program that actually gets started automatically, and that is going to be allowing the two to talk to each other. There's two RFC servers that need to be defined. This is the second one. So far, we've been going for just over 7 minutes. Okay, looking good. Just checking you didn't make any mistakes.
Okay.
So I think because the add-ons installation is complete and he's modified he's created the RFC destinations, he's done everything needed, we can now restart the system so that the new profile parameters that were added earlier will take effect. So this is the only reason why the restart is there, is because the profile parameters are changed. And those parameters are only required if we're using SNC authentication, which we are using for SAP GUI, SAP GUI logon.
I've restarted.
Okay, so now that the system is up, oh, you stopped it, sorry, it's got to start it now. Starts up. Next thing he's going to do is configure the SAP system in SAP GUI to use SNC authentication. So when you install our product on the server and on the workstation, we have an SNC library that is included with the product, and that SNC library is going to be used to do the authentication and also the multi-factor capability that we're going to be showing off.
SAP started.
Also, one of the things that's a lot of customers like about our product is the logging. So he's showing the log file here so that you can see what happens during a logon. And if he double clicks on there, actually it's not going to use our library yet because he's not using SNC. So that will be useful later so you can look at the logs.
I missed this stuff.
Yeah, so in the SAP system entry, in SAP GUI, he's modifying that to put the SNC name in. The SNC name was determined when he set up the server-side software. So every SAP system that's got our software on it, if you enable the SNC library, each SAP system will have its own unique identity. So it's got an SNC name, and that SNC name needs to be put into the SAP GUI config. There was actually some messages that appeared at the bottom. It says no user exists with SNC name. What's actually happening with SNC, some of you may have already experienced this if you used SNC before, is that SNC is used to authenticate the user. Once the user is authenticated, their identity is now known. SAP NetWeaver then looks to try and find a mapping to work out what the SAP user is that user is going to use. It doesn't have to be the same name as their AD user ID. They might, in this particular case, it is the same. What's happening is Srinivas's user ID is S-Sheraku. So in this case, his SAP user ID is the same. It's also S-Sheraku. That doesn't have to be the case. But there is still a need for having a mapping information there. The mapping is effectively identity mapping to map an Active Directory identity onto an SAP user in a specific client. There are ways of setting this up when you install the product. When customers deploy our product across their landscape, they have to initially load all the mapping information into the system, and there is different ways that we can recommend to do that for the initial load. But once the SAP system has been set up and you've done all the mapping, then when users start to use the product, they can log in and be authenticated because it will know what their SAP user ID is. But of course, the thing that's important to stress there is that although the user ID is determined for the SAP user ID, the SAP account doesn't actually need a password because we're not using SAP passwords anymore. And again, there is actually a profile parameter that we would recommend you set, which actually disables the SAP password for a user once they have successfully logged on with single sign-on. And what this does is it allows you to migrate users from non-SNC to SNC authentication. So I'm having trouble catching up here. What Srinivas is doing now is he's modifying the NWBC ICF service so that we can use NWBC or NetWeaver Business Client for the HTTP authentication demo. Don't slow down, keep going. So effectively, we've completed all the SNC thick client SAP GUI authentication piece. What Srinivas is now doing is to configure the functionality for HTTP authentication on the ABAP stack. So as I mentioned earlier, this would be used for things like Fiori Launchpad, it would be used for NWBC, pretty much any ICF service that you can see or manage within the SICF transaction. If you go into SICF and you can see something there, we can authenticate it. And that authentication, as I said, is single sign-on or multi-factor authentication. So what he's doing is he's going to modify a table that we have as part of our product. It's called /CSTB/OC_conf, and that table contains configuration information for this product. And when it eventually wakes up, he will be able to add entries to that table, and those entries are effectively ways of configuring the authentication rules. So PBSA, in case you're wondering, PBSA is short for policy-based secondary authentication. So this is the level 2 authentication functionality that I talked about earlier. When we refer to it in our documentation, we refer to it as PBSA. So he's putting a simple rule in that basically says, if the SAP user role is SAP BC user admin, and they're logging on to this system, and they've got that role assigned to them, then I want to use multi-factor authentication, and the multi-factor authentication auth method in this case is duo. That's all the policy needs to have. Just 4 lines or 5 lines. Okay. That's for later. We'll explain that factor later. So as I said earlier, Duo is the product that Cisco bought recently. We're just using that for some of the demos. We're also going to be using Microsoft Azure multi-factor authenticator for one of the demos. But as I said, we have lots of different products that we support. We're building direct interface to Ping Identity or Ping ID, and Okta is also supported. Google Authenticator, and any MFA product that actually has radius support can be supported with our product. So we very rarely find somebody who's got MFA already and wants to use our product. We very rarely find any problems because the interfaces are there. But there are some benefits in using a direct interface to the MFA product, which is what we've done with Duo. It's a cleaner install, and it also has some functionality benefits. Okay, so the installation is complete. Stop. Right, well done, Srini. High five. 15 minutes and 3 seconds.
Whoa.
Well done. That's a new world record. In Las Vegas 2 weeks ago, we did it in 17 minutes, so 2 minutes quicker. And I think you could probably have done better because you stopped a few times. Okay, so what we're going to do now, I'm going to hand back over to Srini, and he's going to talk through the demo of the product. So you'll actually see the product working now that we've actually installed.
Okay, thank you, Tim, for explaining the steps. So first of all, I'll be showing single sign-on for SNC-based applications like SAP GUI. I've logged on to my workstation using my Windows credentials. So I will try to log into A09. I'm in. I don't need to enter SAP password anymore. And if you look at the status bar, you can see sjericho@cybersafe.com, which is my Active Directory user ID. SNC found that I'm trying to log in, and it found a user in client unread with username sjericho, so it authenticated and let me in. And you also see a padlock which says secure network communication is enabled. This means that the entire network between SAP GUI and SAP server is encrypted. Okay. So next, I'll be showing single sign-on for ICF service. For this, I'll be using NetWeaver Business Client. Let me open a browser. SAP A09. Yeah, this is the URL. Okay. Enter. So this is the first time it is starting. So after restart, so it takes a while, as you know. By the way, authentication is complete. So you can see that I don't need to enter SAP password anymore. Okay. Maybe I can try to log in again, just to show that it won't be that slow. Okay. Next, I'll show authentication using two-factor. Before doing any demo, I want to mirror my mobile screen so that you can see what happens on my mobile. Hold on a minute. Okay. So you can see my mobile screen, right? So if you look at, these are some of the two-factor authentication products which we support. Not all. We support many using Radius or using the native interfaces. So for this demonstration, I'll be using Geo Mobile. We can also support Azure Authenticator, MEDI, Ping ID, RSA token, Google Authenticator, Okta. These are a few of those. So let me show you how Geo Mobile looks like. I need to enable a setting over here so that you can see the Geo Mobile screen. Since it is a security product, they have disabled it by default so that no one can look at the passcodes and all. Okay. So now you have seen the two-factor authentication product which we'll be using for SAP GUI authentication. For this, I need to change a policy. Here you can see that, as Tim was explaining, DO users with SAP user role as SAP BC user admin should use authentication method DO. So I'll add this rule over here so that it is processed. I'll save it. I'll go back to logon pad and I click on A09. Okay. I get a DO mobile notification, as you can see. I need to approve or deny. Let's see what happens if I deny. I'll say it was a mistake. Your DO authentication was denied. Okay. Let's authenticate now. I get the DO mobile notification. I click on it. I need to approve using my fingerprint. So I put my finger on my fingerprint reader, approved, and I am in. Okay. So for ICF services, in order to enable two-factor authentication, I need to change a table, which is called CSTBOCconf. You might have observed that I have added the entries in this. I'll enable the policy. And here also the rule says that it should use DO authentication, and DO authentication is set for users with the SAP user role as SAP BC user admin. And here it is using a DO factor as passcode. Instead of just approve or deny, it asks for passcode. So let me save this configuration. I'll log off. And I'll open the browser and access NWVC. So it asks for DO passcode. If I type something, it says the authentication failed. Let me refresh the OTP and type in that 978663. Log on. So you have seen single sign-on, two-factor authentication. You have seen how easy it is to install and configure. And you might be using SAP Fiori. Nowadays, many people are going the SAP Fiori way. So I want to demonstrate SAP Fiori as well. So first, I'll try to access SAP Fiori Launchpad using browser. I'll be using a different system here because on A09 Fiori is not installed. So I'll be using G01 instead. I'm accessing the Fiori Launchpad. I get a DO mobile notification. I click on approve. I use my fingerprint to approve, and I'm in. Okay. Excuse me, I need to rush. Please excuse me for a minute.
Oh, okay. Hello, I'm a hacker. Right, what can I do on Srinivas's computer while he's away? Let's see. I'm going to try logging into Fiori. Okay.
So looks like someone is trying to authenticate as me. Let me deny the authentication and report it as fraudulent.
Oh dear, it looks like I've been caught. I think I'll close this browser and sneak away before I get noticed.
Oh God, it's not safe to leave the desktop as it is without a two-factor authentication. Okay, let's continue. I'll show SAP Fiori mobile application. So I get a DO mobile notification. I can approve. I need to use my fingerprint. Approve. I'm in.
So Shirley, look where are you thinking?
Yeah, John, I'll be there in a moment.
Hello, I'm the hacker. Right, what's happening here? It looks like Srinivas has left his mobile phone on his desk because he's gone to a meeting. I'm going to try and get into Fiori from his mobile. What's this? I didn't see this before. Press approve. It looks like it's asking me for a fingerprint. But I don't have the right finger. Okay, that's not good. Looks like I won't be able to do anything here, so I'm going to kill this Duo Mobile and come out. Okay, bye. I apologize for the bad acting, by the way.
Okay, so now I'll also demo a level 3 authentication. This is under development, so I'll be using U01. So I'll be showing level 3 authentication for transactions. I'll click on U01. I log in using single sign-on. And let me show the configuration so that you can see what should happen. Here I say for transaction rules, it says it should use Azure MFA. And for users with SAP user role as SAP BC user admin, and it has to protect transaction SU01. So let's see what happens if I try to access SU01. It asks me to enter the Active Directory credentials. If I don't have, I cannot get in. So this is a safe way. If any administrators leave their workstation unattended, then no one can run transactions like this. So let me try to enter the right password. I get Azure Authenticator notification which says to approve or deny. Let's say what happens when I deny. Authentication failed. Okay, let me enter the right password again. And I'll approve now. And you can access SU01. So hope you like the demo, like the product. I'll now hand over to Tim to continue.
Yes, thank you, Srini. So I've just got a few slides I want to show you just to wrap up, before we do the Q&A. So thank you very much for your patience so far. So this slide tries to encapsulate everything in one picture. What we're showing on this slide is the external users on the left, internal users on the right, or internal network on the right-hand side. The concept that I want to explain here is about endpoint authentication and zero trust. As you can probably appreciate from seeing our demo and seeing the product installed, hopefully you've got a rough idea of how the product works now. Effectively, the product is installed on the SAP application servers. There's no additional servers required, no additional infrastructure, apart from if you're using an MFA product, then obviously you need to implement an MFA product separately so that we can talk to it. But effectively, all the decisions about who gets authenticated and how they get authenticated is being done on the application server that you're logging into. And that has some amazing benefits, because if you look at this diagram, what's going to happen is if somebody comes in from the external network and they go through your VPN, through your firewall, and access SAP systems internally, then the SAP system that they decide to log on to will determine how they get authenticated. One of the conditions that we can put in there is not just the role that they've got assigned, but also we can also put the network address into that condition checking. So we can detect where they're logging in from, and you can have different authentication for people coming in from externally or internally. But the point is, the way they get authenticated is determined in the same place, in a single, very easy to configure authentication policy, as you've seen Srinivas show you some examples. So if I log in from the outside and then I log in from the inside on the right-hand side of the diagram, then I'm going to be authenticated potentially the same way through the same policy. And that is really a very important architecture, because the historic or the old way of doing things is to authenticate using strong authentication like RSA secure ID tokens or multi-factor at the perimeter. By taking the authentication, the strong authentication away from the perimeter, you can actually address both internal logon and external logon. You know, typically if somebody's logging on from the inside, they're not going to go through the firewall, they're going to potentially go across the internal network. So this is why this slide is shown, just to highlight the architecture. Now, one of the reasons why that's very important is because the whole industry is moving this way. People have started to realize, people like Gartner and and Google in this example, many companies who are involved in network security are trying to push down this route, push people, vendors, customers, network designers, because effectively the perimeter isn't really a very clear perimeter anymore. Going back 5 or 10 years, the perimeter was very clean. It was like a gateway between your external and your internal network. But now when we start to put applications in the cloud, the perimeter kind of gets a bit fuzzy. Where is the perimeter to my applications? So the idea is that you put your authentication policy decisions onto the applications themselves, and then you don't need a perimeter. And this is called zero trust. It's called endpoint authentication, where the application is the endpoint. I've put a bit of information on this slide to talk about the Google as Beyond Corp project. They've actually documented this well on the internet. So if you want to read about zero trust, this is a good example, a good place to start. So really, as I said, the main thing I want you to take home today is that our product is perfectly architected in line with this zero trust architecture, because we're doing all the decisions on the application server. And as we do more innovation with the product, and as we add features to the product over the next year or so, there will be a lot more policy decision capabilities and a lot more options for authentication methods as we see needs in the market. If any of you listening or watching, by the way, if you have any specific requirements and you're not sure whether we can address them or not, please contact us. We very much enjoy talking to people, and if this product doesn't do it, then we'll potentially add it to the product for you for free. We like to evolve the product based on real requirements that customers have. Thank you very much for attending, and if you are at the TechEd show watching this, then please come to our booth and see us. If you're watching the recording of this session, then please visit our website and contact us if you want to talk to us. Thank you very much for your time. Take care.